If you want to learn about investing but you don't know where to start, stick around to the end of this week's episode because our sponsor for the week, Finimize, is happy to help you get on the right track. For now though, let's get to the show. It feels like I'm dramatically underselling it these days when I say that Sean McVay is one of the NFL's greatest thieves. If you watch Rams games every single week like I do and pay attention to how McVay's offense is structured, and I mean really pay attention to the design, the timing, and the sequencing of his play calls, you'd probably agree with me that there are very few other coaches that are on his level. In fact, I could probably count them on only one hand. But even for somebody as brilliant as McVay, there's always room for improvement. Even he would agree with that. And like all great coaches in this copycat league, he would also agree that stealing core concepts from other great coaches is the best way to stay ahead of the game. Case in point, the Baltimore Ravens under Greg Roman, who are about as far away from the Rams as you can get stylistically speaking, beat the absolute crap out of McVay's squad last November by a score of 45-6. A lot of coaches, after receiving a beatdown like that, would go back to the drawing board and see what they could do better within their own system to have more success. But when it comes to McVay, even right after that game was over, you could see him in real time immediately diagnosing what Greg Roman was doing and how McVay himself could steal from the Ravens to make sure that kind of embarrassment never happened again.
It was impressive. When you sit there and you watch and you feel the operation up close and personal, and you just see, just how sharp they are with their execution, what a dynamic playmaker he is, what a good job they do of creating conflict right before the snap, changing your fits. And
I'm going to stop it right there. Did you catch that tiny comment that McVay snuck in there about changing fits? Let's play that back again.
What a dynamic playmaker he is, what a good job they do of creating conflict right before the snap, changing your fits.
That one line, that innocuous little sentence, is what we're going to be talking about today, because that one sentence tells us all we need to know about what Sean McVay actually stole from the Ravens to make his own team better. When McVay refers to creating conflict right before the snap and changing fits, what he's actually talking about is how the Ravens have used motion at the snap, not before the snap, but as the ball is snapped to create confusion among defenders and make them jump into the wrong gaps in their run fits, which was one of the primary reasons why the Ravens have been able to generate so many explosive runs during the Lamar Jackson era. When there is so much eye candy to deal with for linebackers pulling them in so many different directions, and when the angles of certain blocking schemes can change so drastically by having blockers already moving at full speed as the ball is snapped, it creates a ton of problems for front sevens to deal with while trying to remain disciplined. And we saw that play out with ruthless efficiency in that Monday night game versus the Rams. Baltimore rushed to the tune of 285 yards against a defense that going into that game was 4th in the NFL in run defense, allowing only 89 yards per game on the ground. It wasn't just a bad night for the Rams, it was a flat-out slaughter. But the trends from that game were only one small sample of what the Ravens were doing to every other team as well. Throughout the entire season, Baltimore was obviously first in the NFL for usage of motion at the snap at about 34% on the year, per ESPN stats and info. But in that Rams game specifically, they really took it up a notch, using it on 47% of their plays. LA absolutely could not sort it out at all, and even though the Rams offense themselves was still 4th in the league last season in usage of motion at the snap at 18%, McVay resolved right then and there, that night, to use motion at the snap as much as Baltimore does, because he saw what it did to his own defense when they really leaned into it. And guess what? So far in 2020, he has used it as much as Baltimore. The Rams are 2nd in the NFL in motion at the snap usage at 33%, right in line with what the Ravens did last year, and so far this season, the Rams are 1st in the NFL in percentage of plays called that are runs, even over Baltimore. With that emphasis on motion and committing to the ground game no matter what, LA is 4th in rushing yards per game, 2nd in rushing first downs per game, and 2nd in rushing DVOA, all without a mobile quarterback like Lamar Jackson that can typically help to boost rushing production and efficiency. This is a remarkable turnaround from last year, despite for the most part having the same personnel and the same coaches, and it's amazing to me that just that tiny little tweak of adding more motion to emulate the Ravens has turned this Rams offense into a monster again. I want to give some examples for just how that motion at the snap can create busts in a defense though, so that you can see why this philosophy is so dominant regardless of whatever scheme it's used in, and we'll start with this 12-yard run from Darrell Henderson to begin the second quarter against Buffalo last week. In McVay's terminology, this play is referred to as Tiger West Left Slot Z Left 15U Sift, which I know is a mouthful, but since most of you watching this are probably wondering what the hell all of that means, let's break down that play call piece by piece before we go any further. Tiger refers to the personnel grouping, and that's McVay's way of denoting 12 personnel, meaning 1 back and 2 tight ends. West left slot is the formation. West left means that these 2 tight ends are on the left side of the line, with the U tight end, or some call it the move tight end, being off the ball. Slot means both wide receivers are on the same side, opposite the tight ends, with the Z receiver, Cooper Kupp, being, of course, in the slot. And since we know that Kupp is the Z receiver in Tiger personnel groupings, the Z left portion of the play call means that he is motioning across the formation to the left at the snap. Finally, then, we get to the 15U Sift part of the call, which is the play design itself. 15 is an inside zone run concept where the front side of the play is to the offensive left because it's an odd number. 14, for instance, would be going to the right because it's an even number. But anyway, after pressing the hole to the left, the runner will typically bend this run back into a cutback lane that's created within the blocking scheme. Sometimes it will hit to the front side, of course, if the defense really screws up, but most of the time, just like all other zone running schemes, this will hit the cutback lane instead. Oh, and by the way, U sift refers to the U tight end being responsible for a sift block on the closest edge defender that he can get to after he crosses behind the offensive line. Sift blocks are an excellent way to generate good blocking angles on edge defenders so that they do not crash inside and take away that cutback lane, so that's just one more way for McVay to ensure that this run is able to hit that cutback as it's designed. Now, where this motion at the snap comes into play, remember the Z left portion of the play call, is that Kupp's motion and potential to be a ball carrier himself on a jet sweep is naturally going to pull these 2 linebackers, Tremaine Edmunds and Matt Milano, towards the front side of the blocking scheme. And that's where McVay wants them to be when he dials up these inside zone calls, because he wants these linebackers to be as far away from the cutback lane as possible. You can see that when both Edmunds and Milano bite on that jet motion, it creates a hugely advantageous angle for the center, Austin Blythe, to seal Edmunds from that cutback lane, and again, that's the whole point of the motion at the snap to begin with, to influence Edmunds and keep him from getting into his proper spot in the run fit. Edmunds knows at this point in the play that Blythe's angle is so good that he has no chance in hell of fighting back over the top of that block. So he's forced into just taking a risk and trying to shoot the gap before Henderson can cut back, but obviously he's too late. Henderson hits the hole, the sift block connects to seal off that edge defender, and the play goes for an easy 12 yards. That right there is how motion at the snap affects a run fit. It forces linebackers to think more, they fall for eye candy a lot more often, and it really puts them at a disadvantage in terms of taking on blocks at proper angles. It's a very hard thing to deal with defensively. But that being said, that doesn't mean that it's infallible and that there are no good ways for linebackers to still be gap sound. 2 more times in that Bills game, Sean McVay tried to call 15 or 14 with a jet motion built into it, and those 2 runs combined for only 4 yards. Why the sudden drop-off? Well, because Edmunds and Milano learned what to look for after seeing it the first time, and they adjusted. Take this inside zone call from early in the 3rd quarter as an example. This was the last time McVay called it for the entire game because it went nowhere, and it's a really good example of how a defense can make key adjustments in the middle of a game. This run is from the same personnel grouping, the same formation, but obviously flipped, and the same motion, but this time with the X receiver, Robert Woods. Edmunds and Milano both flow with the jet motion once again, like they're supposed to, but watch how they play this run differently after the snap this time. Milano is tracking the sift block from the start and calling out that the cutback is coming to the backside, while Edmunds takes what's called a rocker step to the front side before planting that foot in the ground and falling back into the cutback lane in the backside B-gap. Edmunds knows that the left tackle, Andrew Whitworth, will be getting upfield to get on the safety and not on him, and he knows that Blythe is at a pretty huge disadvantage to get to him on the second level if he falls back into that B-gap early. So he just triggers early and fills the lane before Blythe can do anything. The defensive line does their jobs and holds firm in the front side C gap and B gap respectively. Milano does his job by shooting the front side A gap that's left wide open, and obviously Edmonds is there in the backside B gap as well. That right there is a good run fit against motion. It took them until their third try in the game on the same play to get it right, but eventually they did, and they made the Rams pay for it. But that's when McVay did what he does best, and he hit the Bills with a counterpunch to punish them. And I mean that literally. He called a counter run that looked almost exactly like inside zone, off of motion at the snap of course, just to punish these linebackers once again and keep them on their toes. This is from only a few minutes later in the third quarter, and watch how the counter was designed to take advantage of Milano and Edmonds overplaying what they thought was another inside zone call. Milano reads a sift block from Kupp, so he's trying to shoot that front side A gap again. Edmonds takes that same rocker step with the motion so that he can then try to fall back into the B gap, but pay attention to the key difference here in the play design. This is how McVay gets them. Darrell Henderson's footwork is different, and so is Goff's ball handling. Henderson doesn't wind back around Goff to get the handoff, he's taking that quick jab step and then getting the ball on a reverse pivot handoff from Goff instead, which means he's getting on that track to the so-called backside of the run even faster than when he did on his cutbacks on inside zone. The timing and most importantly the angles of this design are different. You can see Edmonds shooting the backside B gap, expecting Henderson to be right there inside of the sift block from Cooper Kupp, but again, that isn't even a sift block at all, it just looks like one. And in fact, Kupp is acting as a lead blocker out to the C gap on the edge, not the B gap. Edmonds is in the wrong spot, and the safety Taylor Rapp can't get back outside either because he's caught up in traffic too. They ripped off 14 yards on this run to start this drive, which they ended up scoring on, all because of that tiny little deception. And that touchdown drive, by the way, which was kickstarted by that play, was the beginning of a 29-0 scoring run that brought the Rams back into the lead late in the fourth quarter after being down by 25 points. McVay pulled everything out of his bag of tricks throughout that second half, and by the end of the game, the Bills' defense was exhausted, they were confused, and they were straight up beaten. Hell, McVay called a jet sweep off of that same counter run look that I just broke down, and he got 15 more yards out of it on a crucial 2nd and 10 right when he needed it the most. And then later in that same drive, McVay showed another counter run, again from a similar look, but that time it was a play action pass and not a run, and they scored on it. Cooper Kupp beat Tre'Davious freaking White on that play, one of the smartest corners in the whole league, because McVay baited White into doing what's called replacing on a crack block on Jordan Poyer, which he's supposed to do by the way in order to maintain the integrity of the run fit. But by the time White realized that it was a fake, Kupp was already gone. He took off and there was nothing White could do about it because he was following the rules of his own defense. I know the Rams lost the game last week, but I mean, come on, just look at this. Nobody can deny that Sean McVay was on absolute fire as a play caller, and seeing how this uptick in motion at the snap has turned his offense once again into a juggernaut, let's just say that I'm happy my Texans don't have to play against him this year because I guarantee you we would get murdered by this team. Whether you believe it or not, the Rams are back. Jared Goff is back, the run game is back, and obviously Sean McVay is back too. It may have taken a truly humbling beatdown at the hands of the Ravens to get the Rams to where they are today, but honestly, sometimes to be the best, you first have to get embarrassed by the best. Otherwise, you won't really know how to improve. Sean McVay took his lumps last year, sure, but more importantly, he learned from them. And if these are the results of learning from defeat, well, I would say that defeat was well worth it. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode, and of course thank you to our sponsor for the week, Finimize. Finimize is the easiest way to learn how to invest and manage your finances. A lot of younger people in my generation, I'm 29 myself, they don't start investing until way later in their lives because they don't know how to. But with Finimize, responsible investing is easier than ever to understand. You get all of the tools and information you need to invest with confidence, including the biggest financial news that you need to know, all packaged together in daily morning briefings, as well as professional insights in words that normal people can actually understand. You also get investing guides both in text and audio formats, exclusive interviews, and for premium users, you also get everything from deep dives into specific companies and sectors to access to events where you can connect with industry experts. Personally, my favorite part about the app is just the daily briefings because I can get caught up on just the basic news I need to know while I eat my breakfast, and I don't need to spend a bunch of extra time making sure I didn't miss anything important. It's just a really good way to streamline my investing experience, or at least make sure that I'm informed enough to not do something catastrophically stupid. If you're curious about learning to invest for yourself, you can get a 7-day completely free trial of Finimize to see how you like it at the link in the description below, and of course you can cancel at any time during that trial. But if you're like me and you decide that you really can't start your day without those morning briefings, you can get 20% off of the premium yearly subscription, again at that link in the description below. Again, thank you to Finimize for sponsoring this week's show. And as for me and channel news, I just released the Week 3 recap podcast that you can go check out over on the Bootleg Football Podcast channel, link also in the description. And I should have another Film Room episode coming out sometime next week as well. I'm not exactly sure on the day yet, and I have no idea on the topic yet either, but it will be next week. I'm kind of shooting for the Vikings, particularly Justin Jefferson, because I loved his debut last week, but we'll see how it goes. Something always happens on Sunday that's crazy and kind of distracts me, but either way, there's going to be a Film Room next week. Go check out the pod, and yeah, until next week, later.